welcome to another episode of Nashoba Tech Alumni Podcast, a brand new podcast series where we explore the life of Nashoba Tech and the journeys that our graduates undertake, and careers and community and involvements that they build along the way.
Today's guest is a student from the class of 2014 alumni and a graduate of our television and media production theater arts program, Rayviation.
Hi.
So
very nice to be here.
Yeah. Can you tell us what Nashoba Tech was like when you were a student here? I mean, like, it's been 10 years. What?
What was Nashoba Tech like? I feel like the vibe back then was definitely a lot more of like the lower modded cars. I think it's taken more of like a pickup truck direction since we've left.
Yeah.
I would say that, you know, the tech was an interesting place, right? And it's a really funny question, right? Because I'm just like, all right, going all the way back to 10 years, right? You know, like the tech was an interesting place for me, especially too, coming from Lowell. And I wasn't necessarily like thinking like, like I'm going to be going to Nashoba Tech of all places, right? Like I thought my path was more towards like the Lowell High School direction, or even potentially towards like the Voc direction. But the thing that honestly made me fall in love with Nashoba, especially back then, was the TV media program. Because, you know, I at first was not happy that I was like moving away from all my friends and that there are all these like new people and they're unsure of me, I'm unsure of them, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately I was able to, you know, like blossom and find like my kind of footing here too within the tech. So it was kind of, it was a place where you can make what you want of it, right? And like you can make yourself into something better than what you were.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So did you come from Lowell, or how did you have the opportunity to come to the tech? I mean, that's not really in our district.
No, it's not. I was born and raised in Lowell. However, we drove to Chelmsford to be able to go here. And then from there, the Chelmsford bus would bring us over to the tech. So I'm not sure exactly what strings were pulled for my mom to be like, hey, we need this guy up in here. But like, I know I wasn't the only Lowell kid, right? Like there was actually somebody from my middle school who also went to Nashoba Tech, also in the same class as well. So I guess every now and again they lead for exceptions, but they don't let a lot of us in there. They're like, oh, they're going to scare them.
Did you have like a small class size? Maybe it was like they were just trying to bring in people, like.
I don't know what we would consider small. I think that we had like well over 100 in my particular class. But you know, like the tech isn't like a huge school by any of those kind of means. I think like since then they've actually expanded on the amount of shops that are here since 2014. So
yeah, we've definitely. I think we've doubled in the past 10 years of people that are.
Wow.
Yeah, because we're in like the biggest class of however many years. I don't even know. But
So when you came to Nashoba Tech, did you know you were going to join TV media right away, or was there a process to it?
You know, of course there was the exploratory weeks, right? And honestly, I didn't even know that Nashoba even had a TV media program, right? I was actually interested in television media from a really young age, and I had my first internship actually at the local communications public access station in Lowell, LTC. And from there, I was just like, I knew that I like wanted to be, you know, in proximity to the camera. I had experience with it on the front, in the back, etc. And then the fact that like I had something like a TV media program here, I was, of course, like the most interested in that. And even if I went to the Voc, I might have been a graphic designer, but I know that wouldn't have been like my full passion, so to speak.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of us ended up like that. Like a lot of us didn't really know that TV was an option, and then we kind of looked around and like we kind of found our own little pocket in it. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's definitely how a lot of people end up. But yeah.
And it's also interesting too. I mean, like I would even just like to. Yeah. I like a back and forth kind of thing, right? Because I feel like, especially back then. You know, we're talking like Vine was still out, right? So Vine was still very much active during this period of time. So of course, like, you know, the ubiquitous of getting cell phones and people like filming and doing stuff like that was kind of like my turn in the generation. But like actually having like TV media where it's just like, oh no, like this is a production, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that people could do with their phones and just their phones and social media and whatnot. But that way, it wasn't at that point yet. But for me, it was like a thing where I'm like, oh, it's just so fascinating that they're even just like letting people who are like below 18 have access to this equipment, right? And having and people being like, oh yeah, like you know your way around a microphone, a mixer board, graphics, all these other various things, and that we had to touch all of it, right? Because that you didn't know exactly like what part of production that you were going to be in. So I guess I'm curious for y'all in your generation too, like, do you find that there was like more interest in TV media because like of like how much access like y'all have to like cameras and phones and whatnot? As if I didn't, right? Like I had it too, right? Yeah. But I'm just curious if there's more popularity with the TV shops now versus back then.
I feel like it's definitely taken for granted nowadays. Like, I feel like the way that our shops have kind of gone is a little bit more of like a technical route rather than like actual like like production, I guess. So I don't know. Like, I feel like a lot of us like the cameras. We don't appreciate as much like the back of house kind of stuff, I feel like.
Sure.
Yeah, could you tell us more about like the clubs and activities you did? Obviously, you were in TV media, but like after school and like what you were involved in at Nashoba Tech and like the experiences that you had in clubs or activities after 2:30.
Sure. So I would say that my main things, just in terms of like activities, were track and field and cross country. And also I was a part of the music program, so particularly in chorus, right? Like where we were doing like some of the winter concerts and other things around that nature. Every now and again, we would also go to like retirement homes and serenade the folks there with covers of Bing Crosby, right? And we also, and again, like being part of the TV media shop, theater production was right in there. So I was, not only was I like doing, learning about theater during the day, but afterwards I would actually participate in the musicals, right? My first freshman year, I was just like unsure of just like myself. I'm like, I didn't even think I was going to be staying in the tech for that long, honestly. Like I was very much in the camp of like, get me out because I do not fit in. Like that was my way of thinking back then, right? Yeah. But I feel like once, especially once I found like musicals, right? And like once Miss Smith especially brought me into that level of production and this and that. And at that point, I've never done a musical. So back then we had Hairspray, where I was Seaweed. We had Once Upon a Mattress, where I was playing the Wizard, and then and this is actually a very full circle moment I'm having right now, because in my senior year we did Shrek the Musical, and I wanted to be Donkey so bad. I wanted to be Donkey. Smith wanted me to be Donkey. The person, Russell, my good friend Russell, who played Donkey, also was saying like, yeah, you should have been Donkey. But the reason I couldn't have done Donkey was because I was bad at math, and the math MCAS in particular. And after my parents were like, Raysam, I know that you really want to be Donkey and Shrek the Musical. However, you need to graduate high school, right? So like it's one of those things where you really have to balance out and really be like, oh, what do you want in this lifetime? And I wanted to go to college, so sometimes that's outweighed. But I also do feel like there's a, you know what I mean? Like in high school, you're gonna go through these things. You're gonna have some time away from it and being like, oh, what should I have done, right? Have no regrets, you know what I mean? Like there's gonna be some of those things, but maybe there will be another opportunity to play Donkey and Shrek the Musical.
You know what?
But you never know.
If we ever do that again, I will let you know.
Right. If y'all do another production of Shrek the Musical, I will try out. Like I'll come back. I'll move. No, actually, no, I won't move from Chicago, but I will fly out. I will go to rehearsals. We'll figure it out.
I'll let you know.
You know what? Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so do you have any words of advice for our freshmen, or like anything? At least like you mentioned, like you kind of felt like you were left out. I mean, do you have anything that helped you get around that? I mean, yeah.
Like I think my mom was more stubborn than me. Like that was honestly like the reason why I'm like, she was just like, no, you're staying here, and I'm like, okay, I guess so.
Yeah.
Ooh, let's see. For freshmen, I mean,
like even just this week, we just got our freshmen. So, I mean, I've noticed a couple that are a little more stragglers. I mean, like, what would you say to them to make them, like, a little more sure of themselves?
Sure. I would say that it's always possible to find your lane, right? And maybe it's not necessarily in production, and maybe it's not necessarily in the shop that, you know, your parents want you to go for, or like your family business, or like whatever it is, right? But I think especially like the beautiful thing about TV media and theater arts is that there's so many different avenues that you can go down, and so many different phases of interest. And even, you know, before the Pictures Up actually happened, we were talking about senior projects and like this kind of things that y'all are interested into. Like, oh, people are more interested in photography versus videography, and some people are just really into doing audio expertise as well. So I would say at the very least, like as a freshman, like start broad, really start to explore these kind of things. And you'll know what doesn't fit, right? Like you'll know and feel like attracted to like the actual thing that you're like meant to do or want to do. And even if like you just love all of it, then like, yeah, like there's, especially when you like actually start to establish yourself in a career and all that stuff too, like there's that whole thing of like, do you want to be a specialist versus a generalist, right? I would also say for anybody that's exploring and learning and doing that stuff, start as a generalist, really feel out what you want to do, and then continue down that path and be the best at that.
Yeah. That was really solid. I mean, what about like words of advice for upperclassmen? I mean, for me and Thomas, even like
we're almost graduating. We're almost going to graduate.
We're a little nervous. I mean, like what can kind of even that out? I guess.
What can even out anxieties about the? I mean, like what could I possibly say that to iron out all the scary things that's going to happen in the world, right? Like
you know what? Make us believe it.
Make us believe it. I don't know. Maybe listen to "Is It Fun" by Paramore. That's something that you could do.
I'll check that out.
No. Let's see. What for upperclassmen about to graduate? I
mean, even like
Sorry, go
ahead. If you like ever thought about like, oh, I'm kind of cut between these two different paths of life, or like when we're getting closer to deciding what we want, like what's helpful?
Okay, actually, this is going to be my like hot take platform, and feel free to clip this, right? Feel free to make it go viral on social media. But what I will say for upperclassmen at this particular point, and say if you really, and you say if you, I'm talking about the production people specifically in this round, right? I would say, do not be boxed into higher education as like the only be all end all, right? Because I think the thing for me that I would really have valued to learn at a particular point, especially in Massachusetts, where like there is a growing production industry, and it's like a really big commercial town, especially. And one of the things that I came to learn about, like after the fact, after just going to like a mass film office event, was about this organization called Central Booking. And essentially what Central Booking is, it's a platform that like you pay a small fee for. And with that, you now have access to any time that there is a production happening that comes from like out of town, or something that's happening like in Massachusetts proper, then you are now like on a contact list to say like, hey, producers can now call you or reach out and say like, hey, we have a Bank of America commercial that we want to shoot, right? And you can now have like start to even rack up union hours too, depending on like some of those shoots, right? And even my first gig off of Central Booking was actually an Adam Sandler film, Hubie Halloween, if you've seen that.
Yeah.
I was in the I was in I was a production assistant from the art department. And for me, like it was one of those like really funny things where I'm just like, oh, like it's so funny that they didn't. And the reason why I say like don't box it with it in college, right, is because like they're not going to teach you everything. They're not going to hold your hand. It's good for networking. It's good for like being in like proximity to certain things. And yes, I also do acknowledge that like, of course, like certain jobs will require you to have a bachelor's degree and anything else like that nature, right? But it's a really interesting thing between the people I was meeting on set who were in film school versus the people who are like, I just heard about this from my uncle and he got me in here, and now I'm making X amount of dollars a year just doing like commercials for like, from a couple of months, a couple of seasons, and then they're just good. That's amazing. You know what I mean? And it's not something that like requires you to go into like a mountain of debt on top of that too. Because again, like that's another big thing, right? I feel like they should just like fix that particular system, but that's another hot box thing for another time. But all of that to say is that like truly explore all of these options, right? And if you have the ability to even just take like a gap year to just like really figure yourself out for just whatever, like that college is still going to be standing in the next year. And if it's not, then hey, guess what? You missed out on some fraud, which is always a good thing, right? Like who's to say like colleges get shut down,
right?
You know, you can't finish those things. It happens. It happens.
That sounds like an awesome way to get your foot in the door, though. Like
absolutely, especially
to lessen that pressure, because a lot of it is just like the buildup of, oh my gosh, like I don't have enough on my college resume for this, you know? Because but
absolutely.
So as we talk about college, is there any like experiences in TV media that prepared you for after high school and college?
Ooh. Honestly, and this is like another great thing about the program at Nashoba Tech. I always, whenever like people are like, Raysam, you've been doing media from like since you were 14, blah blah blah. Like who's like, and like they like you would think that like, oh, like college was really the thing that prepared me for like the career that I have right now and all that. I do not credit my college in the way that I credit Nashoba Tech. Like I'm being so serious when I say that, right? Where Nashoba Tech, specifically the TV Media Theater Arts program, like prepared me more than that kind of stuff, because you got to think about it too, where a lot of people are coming from like other general public education backgrounds, etc. Like, and then I was actually relearning some of the things that I already had learned during my time at the tech, right? And there was actually a time after I had completed my documentary Days of Division and came back and had a screening at for the alumni a couple of years ago, right? And or not the alumni, like the students a couple of years ago. And I just was just like, hey, like let me just like let's play a little game here, right? And I was just like, keep your hand raised, and I believe it was juniors and freshmen for that particular class too. So mind you, like people your age at the time, right? Yeah. And I was just like, raise your hand if you know Final Cut, raise your hand if you know After Effects, raise your hand if you know about mixing, about graphics, and this, that, the other thing. And there were still like a sizable people who still had their hands raised. And I was just like, you know as much, if not more than a Framingham State senior right now.
Yeah.
Really take that gravity in, where it's just like, you already have the tools for it.
Yeah.
It's just about like who's gonna like let you in, who's gonna like, how are we gonna network with these people, who like, and also like what do you want to do, like what kind of, like, you know what I mean, like we're media makers. There's so many pathways that you could take in terms of like job, sure, but then also in terms of the content of it, right? Like is this something that is, you know, about an important issue that you want to highlight? Is this maybe exposing a particular thing? Is this something that you're like, hey, like we just need to preserve this moment in time by just having this like on film, so that way other people like years from now can go and like watch it as well. So there's so many pathways that you could do with that, and I think that like right now you already have more tools than like people who go out there and are paying all this money for film school and all these other various things, right? And yet you're getting it at a great developmental point in your life too. So I think that that's also another thing I would say for that.
Yeah. Would you argue that like we should probably try and get our foot in the door like before we even get into college? I mean, with the skill set that we have, do you think that would be plausible for like an actual career?
You know, I would say it gets a little dicey. I would say that if you're 18 specifically, right, it's a lot easier, especially when you are, you know, considered your own like legal adult at that threshold, but there's still some learning to do for sure. But also, you know, there's this one book I'm reading right now, The Proximity Principle, and it's really about like that whole thing about getting your foot in the door, and also the different kind of people in this life that we're going to meet that are maybe more professors versus producers. And, you know, I would say like especially like at your age too, like that is, don't necessarily think of that as a detractor, right? Like it actually like be a bonus on that level too, because like if some 16, 17-year-old like came up to me on like LinkedIn, I'd be like, on one hand, I'd be like, what are you doing on LinkedIn? Right. Well, on another level, like they're like, hey, like I just want to learn from you. I just want to like take some time to just like talk about something. And at that point, just taking notes and being like, thank you for your time, blah, blah, blah. I'm going on from here. And at that rate, like you stick in people's mind, especially when you leave a good impression, especially when you're kind, especially when you're just like not necessarily looking to be like, hey, give me a job right now. And it's just like everyone's looking for a job. Like there's a whole queue of people, but you know, you could at the very least like start to start leaving impressions at the very least, right? Even if it's on a foot in the door, being like, hey, I'm your neighbor. I left you some brownies here. At least like get your name
out there, kind of give out cards kind of thing. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's about QR codes right now. And cards is like I would say that's an interesting thing. Link trees on link in bio. You know what I mean? Like I've done more exchanges that way than business cards. Probably business card printers don't want me to say that unless you have it like unless it looks like a holographic Pokemon card. Unless you're taking it to that level.
Right.
I don't know. like I don't know. Like leave impressions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, from college itself, like, what do you really cherish kind of from that? Because, I mean, obviously you think that there's a value to at least, like, the experience of the college. Like, what exactly do you think that adds?
Yeah, I would say that, of course, like, college gave me great friends and great teachers who, like, I still keep in contact with. And honestly, I know I say, like, I credit the tech with a lot more of like the base skills that I have on this one. But what I will say for college is that like they help really like refine on that particular thing too, right? If I had, we'll put it like this, right? Like we were talking about my senior project, Life After Nashoba, and we're also talking about my other documentary that I had that I made during like my college senior year, Days of Division. And to me, like Days of Division is like the sharper, better product, right? And it's also one of those things that was very relevant during the time that it was covering the issue about the fate of Lowell High School between either renovating it downtown or moving it over to Colley Stadium over near like the Belvedere neighborhood. But point being is that there was no Days of Division without that, or without like me actually like having professors who are talking to me on a more collegiate level to say like, hey, like you are an adult, you're going to be speaking with other adults, this is how you should carry yourself, we have access to like all this great equipment. And that's another thing too, where like as long as you have access to particular equipment like that, and that could be through a college, that could be through a public access station, other various things too, you could purchase it yourself. There's also rental houses. Hunts is also available. I think Rule Boston Camera is also one as well. So I'm gonna give them free plugs to all these various places. But point being is that like as long as you have access to like some equipment that you already know how to use, and like like you already like come into a room looking more official with the Pelican case than without.
So with your actual college senior project, what did you end up doing with that? I mean, like, did that kind of end up like Nashoba's senior project, where it was like kind of just tucked away, or what did you do?
Yeah, I would say like Days of Division was my first foray into actually like doing the full documentary tour, right? I had actually submitted it to some film festivals. I'd actually had some screenings around the Lowell area, and then also over in Tewksbury, also in Lynn as well. And honestly, that documentary was my business card. That was like my actual calling card between places to say like, hey, this was a really hot button issue that a lot of the Lowell and also like a lot of the surrounding towns were concerned about. But through these screenings, could we also host a post Q&A discussion where we could facilitate what was going on there and start to heal some of those divides, right? Yeah. And also through that and putting that on like a portfolio site and all these other various things, right? And being able to say like, yeah, I'm able to handle a documentary, have it, and that documentary itself was about like 34 minutes, so like it could be within that range, but it was also told like fairly even-handedly between the two sides that saw the issue very differently. But it was one of those things where, it gave me the learning to be like, okay, like there is a very particular way that you can market a documentary and what the shelf life of a documentary is during like a particular set of time, right? I feel like the issue was like mostly behind people, but it's still kind of popping up in all these other various ways. But all of that to say is that it was the thing that allowed me to kind of go from place to place and have people be like, wow, like I really like the way that you put this thing together. I want to now like bring you on for another documentary, or I might have a similar thing that's going on in my town. And it was also one of those things where it was important for me to really be like, okay, well, now that I know how to use the camera, but like what do I want to do with that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it solidified that a lot of my work tends to gravitate and like towards like issues of like socio and like political kind of content as well. And it's cool to be able to like put that on a film and not be able to shy away from these issues because they are really important.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I would say about Days of Division. And it's on YouTube. If you care to watch it, Days of Division is on YouTube. It helps if we put in Days of Division LOL, because otherwise I come up amongst fans and whatnot. We still need to work on that SEO.
Got it.
We'll check that out.
Mm-hmm.
So what is some ways you like worked after graduation? Like what are some jobs that you did?
Yeah, like you talked about opportunities. Like which ones did you jump on, I guess?
Which ones did you pick?
It was interesting. I feel like the Days of Division actually got me access to work to do a service here at the Boys and Girls Club, because I actually did a screening over at the Boys and Girls Club in Lowell, because I was just like, yeah, this is an issue that's like impacting a lot of like the teens themselves, and they're like very like left out of that conversation. Yeah. So they were just like, we love your work, we love the way that you're talking with the teens, blah blah blah. Like, would you like to work here? And I'm like, I've never done a service here. So from there, I was just like, okay, I'm doing it for a year. And then after that, I worked at another public access station over in Tingsboro at the time, working with somebody who I'd known from before, Steve Brogan. And from there, I was with the public access job, I was able to still like balance and be like, okay, I have like a fairly regular thing that I go to from a consistent basis, but I also have the ability to now like go into central booking, right, and start to like get some of these gigs who are like, hey, and again, mind you, these are not for the faint of heart by any means, right? Like these are talking like maybe 12, 14-hour days, like on set, on your feet, running talent, like doing all these other various things, right? Just to be in proximity to all the Hollywood magic, right? Where you're pairing hot dogs and the hot August sun to make it look like a food fight for the QB Halloween on Netflix. I'm doing a lot of plugs today, like for stuff that's not mine.
It's all right, throw them in.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so, and then from there, it was one of those things where like while working like both of those things and also getting into production, I was like I also found within myself, I'm like, I need something more consistent than this, right? Like I need something that's like going to, and I was just like going through like other various things in like my particular life too. So I had reached out to my former manager at the time, like not to spoil the story too much, but Joe Serra, who worked at what was then called Kronos, and Kronos is like located in Chelmsford and then moved over to Lowell, but then became UKG during the year of 2020 when they were just like, hey, we're putting out this call for a video editor. And I was just like, I've never worked in like a corporate environment before or a part of a marketing team. I did not have my degree was in communication production, like integrated production specifically. But I did not have a marketing background. So I was just like, oh, we'll see what happens here. Okay. And, just through like reaching out on LinkedIn and being like, hey, I saw your podcast episode where you were talking about this creative thing, blah, blah, blah. Like, just thank you for the opportunity. And he was just like, you know what? Yeah, let's bring this guy through. And from there, I was able to work as a video producer and editor for UKG on their internal marketing team. And that was a position that I had held for 4 years, and it was like right around the time of 2020 and like the lockdowns and whatnot too. So it was actually very lucky timing on my part, because a lot of the productions that I was working on were shut down or like were like heavily minimized in terms of like crews, like things that like would have been like well over 100 were like now getting like stripped down to like, let's say like 20 or 30 or so. Versus like me being able to just take my laptop and continue my work from home and be able to have a steady salary and all these other various things and healthcare and all these various things. I caught myself very fortunate that I was in that position versus like, getting like furloughed or laid off during that particular time even. And, you know, outside of just like having a gig, like it was also something that really helped develop me into like really learning like the roles that I really wanted to take on, not just for UKG, but also for other productions, right? Like that's when I was really like, yeah, like I really like producing. I really like editing. Directing, I've tried. Writing, I've tried. Like I've done these things. I still do these things now and again, but it doesn't give me that same fire, right? And it also goes back to that thing I was talking about earlier about like you'll find your lane. You'll find the actual thing that you want to go for. And then but yeah, like it's not just something, and you'll continue to find those things too, especially like as you age. It is a ever evolving process in terms of like really figuring yourself out. Like figuring yourself out is a lifelong journey.
Yeah. So you mentioned like you're kind of fire, but like how did that come along with freelance, and how did you really get into that? Like what kind of projects threw you in with freelance, I guess?
Yes. And that is a bigger conversation for sure. That I'll try to minimize.
All good.
But I had like my own like personal journey, right, where I was being beckoned to Chicago. Right, I'd only visited twice before making like the decision to actually, you know, leave the dream job that I had over at UKG and all these other various things that I had behind my network, all this other kind of stuff, and essentially go over to Chicago, where I was just like, I've never felt more access to the kind of things that I was interested in, and with people that I feel like I could like really like do this with, just versus like the, you know, the kind of like waters that I was swimming in during the time in Massachusetts production scene and doing all these other various things. And also like with that, the move to Chicago, like one of the UKG's like office policies was just like, hey, like we would love to keep you, like all these other various things, but however, like we can't, just because like that's not the direction that we're going in. And of course, like, yeah, like could I have like gone and like searched for another job and all the other various things? Like, yes. However, I decided to double down, right? Like on top of just like completely uprooting my life.
Yeah.
I was just like, I have enough here that I've like saved up over like the years, just because like I thought my life was going in a different direction, but then yeah, hard pivot, all right. And with that, I was able to say like, if there was ever going to be like a city where I feel like I can have access to different industries, different environments, different people, it's going to be like while I have full control over my day, right? Versus like trying to do something 9 to 5 and find and muster the energy just to be able to like continue on doing my own stuff at the same time too, right? Or be able to like look for these things without also like splitting my focus. So I would say for me, like that was always part of the thing. And also like on top of like stuff that I was doing between local access stations and UKG and all these other various things, like I was always taking things on the side where I'm like, yeah, like if I can help out or take the time off or do anything else of that nature, I was still like keeping my own creative career still pushing at the same time here, because again, as great as it was working within that corporate environment and also like learning things from like great people who have all different sorts of like vantage points and experiences, right? It was also another thing too where I'm just like, yeah, like, but outside, if for whatever reason I lose my job tomorrow, like what is my identity outside of that, right? It's one of those things where especially when you are putting yourself into a job and all these other various things that aren't like your own incepted idea, right? That's kind of like the nature of work, at least in this modern age, right? Like we're no longer in like the era of like the golden watch at the end of retirement and whatnot. Like people are also flexibly moving from place to place, and also companies are like, yeah, like if we need to like lay some people off or like start to move in a different direction, then like yeah. And for me, ultimately, it's about control. It's about being able to like network and meet people, and mind you, just like if I may even just get on, you know, another soapbox. So far it's 3 if we're keeping track at home, right? Is there is like such a power in just going outside. You know what I mean? Like, which like again, it might not sound whatever, right? But like just like truly even going to the park and walking my dog and seeing somebody like with a DSLR I have then like been able to like go over and like meet other people at their studio openings, and then meeting people who attended their studio openings that are like, hey, I actually work for this organization that you've been following for this and such long, right? And I also have this other person that works over at like this comedy club that you wanted this in at, right? And after like again, like just purely off of going to the park one day and just saying hello to somebody, I now have access to all these other various things where like I was at a time where I'm like, if I was just working a 9 to 5 at that rate, like I would have probably been at the office already.
Yeah. That sounds like such a like sporadic kind of lifestyle to live. I mean, like on the day to day, what does that kind of look like for you? Because it sounds like you're working with all different kinds of people.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely a variety of folks that come in. And it's one of those things, too, where, again, I chose to double down and do the harder thing. And I would also say that it requires some outreach, right? It requires some relationship massaging and just being like, hey, like what even is the industry here, right? And of course, like there's these things that like I've been able to accomplish with my friends who are content creators or who have their own podcast which they need a producer for, and all these other various things, and also just like sometimes offering services up for free just to say like, hey, like I just like to come in the door, like I left some brownies here, like let's see if. And even if nothing comes of it, then like, yeah, I got better at editing. I got better at like talking with people and all these other various things. However, I will say for anybody who's like, even if y'all are looking to do the freelance thing too, potentially, and especially when you're an adult and especially when you're living on your own too, you need structure, right? Like again, we might be like, why do I have to go to English at 2 or blah blah, right? Like, and again, it might seem arbitrary, but it's one of those things where it's just like having structure in your day is going to help out so much. Because do you know how tempting it is to just have Baldur's Gate 3 like in the corner,
right?
When you could just be like, I'm like, oh, I can just battle with wizards, right, all that stuff too versus getting these things done. But you know, you can't do that because right now I'm not streaming, right? Like that's not like Baldur's Gate 3 is not going to pay my rent, so I have to bring that structure to my day.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does require discipline. It does require like reaching out and going out to all these other various things and just being ready to talk about yourself, being able to just sell yourself and do all these other various things. And I would also say it's an interesting lifestyle to live, and hopefully I live it for a long time.
Do you have a favorite story or memory from your job that you'd like to share?
Ooh. And this is going to be an interesting one, but during one of my final days over at UKG, there was a really high level event that we had called the sales kickoff, right? And essentially it's just like this event where we have and again, it's a global organization. So we have like salespeople and other various folks in the company coming in to this one location, and the executives are there and all these other various things. And being part of the marketing team, like you're in charge of the actual materials like that's actually going to be playing during the entirety of the event, and like, you know, it's what the banners look like, it's what this and what that looks like. And again, it's one of those things where like going through it at the time, it was very like okay, we really have to get this done, that done, things are changing, that blah blah blah. And just because like my Wi-Fi was so slow, because like these files also had to be like huge too, because they're like playing on these like big LED screens that are happening, right? And because my Wi-Fi was just like not cutting it, they were just like, Raysam, you gotta get on a plane to Tennessee. And I was just like, okay, I've never been to Nashville before, and it was one of those things where it wasn't planned necessarily, but it was one of those things where, especially like during like my last few days, I was able to actually like meet co-workers who I've never like met in person before, because again, mind you, it's also been like mostly through the screens, right? And again, it's a global organization, so like you're meeting for people all over. But for me, it was fun to be able to just like, and again, at this point, like everybody like knew I'd already like moved to Chicago at this point too, so like people were like, how's it going, how's this and that, like thanks for like everything that you're doing here. And I was just like, yeah, like beyond just like having the stuff on the hard drive, I'm like, how else can I be helpful here? Like how else can we do the actual work that we do, and we crushed it, and it was amazing. Just seeing like the final things come together was so satisfying, because for the most part, like I'm like, yeah, like I edit the videos, I send them off, and I'm like, have fun wherever you play that, right? But to be able to actually like be in the audience and see people react to that, and have all these other various things, and like be around people who like I still like hold and love like very dearly as well. And I'm glad I get to say that, because not everybody gets to say that about places that they work at or they leave or whatever. But yeah, I would say that even though it was like a really quick turn thing, it was just like such a blast to be able to like be in that kind of high pressure environment.
Like that's like the okay, like just go.
Yeah, just go with it. Go with the flow.
Yeah. Like I'm getting on a plane.
Yeah.
But yes, that's a favorite that sticks out for me.
That's nice. Well, I mean, I know it sounds like you sound pretty happy where you are, but I mean, like you said as well, everybody grows. So, I mean, where do you see yourself in like 5, maybe 10 years?
5 or 10 years.
Obviously on the track that you are right now, hoping that it doesn't change.
Sure. See, and this is I felt like this question was going to come up, and I wish I had prepared something, but it kind of goes into the answer I'm about to give. Going to Chicago itself was not on my bingo card for anything, right? Like it was one of those things where like it was a very like sudden thing that I'm like, I have to do this now at this particular point. And it was the most like gone to the wind thing that I've ever done, because beforehand I was a really big planner. I was like, okay, as long as we do this at this track, at that juncture, whatever, then I'll be good. And that's the thing, right? I'm not saying I'm against planning or anything else like that, but it's just kind of being like ready for things to change in that particular way. So I can't say where I'm going to be or how I'm going to be necessarily, but I'll give the contours, right? I'll paint a broad brush, right? I would like to have fun in this life. I would like to be comfortable in this life, and that's both like financial, and that's also like the space that I'm living in. I would also say that I want to make media that matters. Ultimately, I want to do stuff that's like off of like the beaten track of like, going through like in order for I've gotten off of the track already to be like, okay, like unless it's on Netflix or unless it's in like an AMC or whatever, then that is the only way that media counts. And I've departed from that way of thinking, and now I'm in a place, and I think that like especially like the media environment that we catch ourselves in at this particular point, especially with grassroots independent media, news journalism, independent film, etc., it is a really exciting time. And I want to be a part of that wave that has people being like, I'm gonna cancel these subscriptions that aren't doing anything else for me, and I'm gonna go to my local theater and do this and that. And wouldn't you know, Raysam is hosting another documentary that also has another screening going on, and also like a post discussion, and we're having like activities and other things of that nature, right? So for me, being able to do stuff with my camera that actually makes a difference or has people thinking about life in a particularly different way, and also be able to scale that on like a sustainable level at the same time too, like that, those are all the contours that I would like to do, right? Because I feel like right now I'm in the process of doing those kind of things. Right now it's like in the real grind portion of it, but I would like to be able to take some time off at the very least, right? And be like, okay, I don't have to worry about this particular thing in this juncture. So that's what I would say.
Okay.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So in today's day and age, why do you think it's important to have like diversity in media?
Diversity in media. I mean, of course, right now, these stories are particularly really important because I feel like, it is being targeted for something that they're like, okay, we need to like start to move this back or push this away or all of these other various things, right? And I think that there is a difference for diversity just for the sake of diversity to be like, we're filling up a quota. And I think that kind of media people are tired of and whatnot, or maybe we can find a zone where it's like more discerning. But I also do think that in terms of diversity in media is that like we need diversity in terms of just like not just on-screen representation, but also behind the scenes representation. Also the people who are making decisions in boardrooms and all these other various things, right? Like I think that that is honestly going to be the best environment, that actual diverse media that matters, that is saying something, that is doing something new, can actually survive. Because I could tell you even right now too, like even some of my experiences like back in Nashoba when I first arrived there, like I had people being like, oh, like you're the first Black person that I've ever met, and you're not like anything that I thought the 50 Cent music videos were telling me, right?
Right.
So, and I'm like, yeah, and again, and that's one of those things where like media does matter at that point, because like it does form opinions, it does make impressions about people without you actually like knowing them, right? So if you can get in before the door and also be able to say like, hey, people are people, you know, they have a different set of life experiences and this and that, or maybe their food might taste like this or like that, but you know, there's a delicious palette that we can find in with all that kind of stuff too. So that's what I would say, like diversity in media is important.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we near the end of our podcast, we would like to talk to you about our school's portrait for a graduate and the 5 R's. A Nashoba Tech student is ready, responsible, respectful, reliable, and resilient. So how would you say that you could exemplify these kind of 5 R's in your everyday work life?
Wow. I'm about to say, like, this feels like the...
It's definitely, like, the big question.
Yeah,
No
okay,
pressure.
so I'm going to need those R's one more time.
I got you. So we got... Oh, we just
We
lost
have-
him.
we have-
Okay. We got respectful, responsible, resourceful, resilient,
Yup.
and what does that say?
Ready.
Ready. So
Ready, okay.
basically just how
How
are
can
you
I
a good
exemplify
worker?
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say doing work kindly and respectfully, of course, right? Like doing it in a way where you keep a true collaborative spirit going, right? Because especially when like you get in positions where like you're a producer, director, executive, etc., you know, systems of power like tend to like change people, right? Like and like having access to certain things also changes people. However, it's one of those things where like you can always determine the environment or the safety of how people feel when they're on your sets or while they're on your particular projects and all these other various things. And you know, of course, like within this life you have to be ready for things to not go exactly as you plan it to, right? So within that, having that level of resilience to say like, hey, this is not going to deter me from doing exactly what I need to do in terms of just like making stuff that matters and also being a good person along the way, and not having just like all work just like consume you in that particular way either. And in terms of readiness, you always got to stay ready.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it is truly one of those things where anything can happen, and it's good to have contingencies. It's good to have all these other various things. But what I guess like what I will say just to like land the plane is to just be ready for like something good to happen too, right? I feel like we're very concerned, or we're conditioned to really like manufacture or at least like pigeonhole where our dreams and aspirations should be, just because of like historically people like me haven't had that before, or maybe if it's more personal, they're like, oh, nobody in my family has done this, or they don't understand that, or just understand this. And it's one of those things at that rate, they're like, okay, so I'm just gonna like dream smaller. I'm just gonna set my expectations over here where I will have maybe a satisfactory life but not a happy life, right? So really try to like be ready for what a happy life could be, right? Like really like dare to dream big, right? And again, it might sound corny in a particular way, but it's one of those things where I feel like there's so much of life that just incentivizes us to just like dream small and just like make ourselves like less than, versus actually like seeing the people who are living life out loud and really just, you know, going for it, right? Like when people really like go for it, you'll be surprised to see like how many people are gonna like root for you and help you along the way, and all the like the little ways, the big ways, all that stuff. But you know, it keeps you going. It keeps you just ready for that next challenge.
Yeah, that was a great answer to that too, because I feel like in this kind of like this kind of or work, I guess. It's a lot of like, oh, wait, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if I'm going to get the right opportunities. And that is a good, like, just thing to think about, I guess, is that, you know what? Sometimes some things will happen that are good. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio sharing your experiences with us. To our audience listening in, thank you so much for being part of our premiere episode of Viking Alumni Podcast. Please join us again as we talk with other Nashoba Tech graduates working in today's job market. So thank you so much for talking with us. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Again, this is Raysam, or otherwise known as Rayviation.
That's it.
Yeah.
The pleasure is mutual for sure. It was great talking to the two of you, and hope to see you out there in the field.